Our next speaker for our Saturday morning session, we have Brian Besco. Brian has a nice little tent out in the middle of the exhibit area out front, and he's got these beautiful material artifacts, the spirals. They're kind of, I don't know, some of them remind me of hula hoops. I've seen these things around for years and years, and he's got a pretty well thought out and implemented way to make these things. And so that's some good credibility right there. Brian is from Buffalo Gap, South Dakota in the Black Hills. It's a little town of about 134 people where he does a lot of workshops. He's a Reiki master, an ordained minister, and he's a self-taught geodowser because there really are no schools for that. He got into this work partly through analyzing this shape, the Triskelion, which is an ancient Celtic motif, and it has always had a lot of power. Archaeologists have known about this for a long time and known about the respect that Celtic people had for this shape and that it would have some kind of implications technologically, but nobody knew what they were. Brian is starting to figure that out. He's also worked a lot with Slim Sperling, who provided a lot of the information on making these tensor rings. They're really just copper, mostly recycled wire with bronze brazing, and they are really nice to have around. I've handled some of these things made by other people in the past, and they work very well in unexpected ways. He's worked with frequencies based on pyramid measurements. He's in the process of slowly quitting his day jobs and now is working with energy healers and clairvoyants, getting feedback on how his tools are working. Let's welcome Brian Besco.
Thank you, Mike. All right, well, it is an honor to be here today with everybody. I appreciate you guys all for showing up here this morning. And as Mike was talking about, the Triskele, it is an ancient symbol. And as we're going to speak on water energetics, I'll just touch on the Triskelion here for a moment. It's in a Celtic tradition, they have different Triskelions, and usually they have a central point and then three legs that spiral out. Where this guy, as you see on the screen, it has the one central point with the two spirals on it. People have been drawing this thing since they were kids. A lot of people have it tattooed on their body. Fishermen on the East Coast have been making them for decades and putting them in their holding tanks to keep their fish alive longer. So everybody knew that this symbol had something to do with water. Through our own askings, we found out that this is actually a symbol of the water elemental, is what we call it. We call it Hedika. With the gals who wrote the Dancing with Water book, The New Science of Water, this is a great book, I'll keep referring to it, they called me up one day and said, well, we call it a Triskelion, and everything that you guys are putting out on what you believe this does with water, we have all the scientific evidence on that. So basically, what the Hedika or Triskelion does is it puts out vortices, piezoelectric, that work with water. You can take just the single Hedika or Triskelion without this entire water coaster, and you can put your glass of water on top of it, and it will neutralize the pH out of very acidic water within 24 to 48 hours. It also energizes the water, and it's great because if you're not sensitive to subtle energies or anything, you can actually use these Triskelions and tell a difference by sitting your water on there, and overnight you'll be able to taste and feel a difference in the water that you drink. And from there, we're just going to start talking about the tensor rings. The tensor rings were discovered by Slim Sperling in 1996. Him and his partner, Bill Reed, who's still in Colorado, discovered the rings. Slim went and he had just taken a piece of wire, and he was familiar with the idea of cubit lengths. A cubit length, the one that we're using and that he discovered works in a tensor ring, is the royal cubit. It's found above the king's chamber. And in the Pyramid of Giza. And so this royal cubit, the 20.6 inches, is something that he would cut a single wire to. Now, with this whole theory of how these things work is that a straight line, a solid object, contains a polarity. So you have on one end a vortex of energy that comes in, and you have energy that flows through and a vortex of energy that goes out. Now, you can find this in trees, you can find it in a wooden dowel. There's actually tribes that knew about this, and when they built their dwellings, they would actually use specific lengths of trees and always butt them up so you had a circular flow, so you were creating a tensor field. So what gives that power then is that flow of energy. Now when Slim went and he cut it out to a specific length and he put it together, what he found was that this was creating a vortex that was a one-way vortex out one side and one way out the other side. And they found just through playing around with it that one side of this produced a healthful and beneficial energy for the human, while the other side did not. And they played around with fungus and plants and everything with this, and they had an incident that led them to believe that one side was no longer healthful and beneficial. So what Slim figured out was you take that piece of wire and you fold it in half, and then you do the twisting on it. When you twist the wire and you bring it together, I'll show you here on this slide up here, is that where this comes together, you have both ends of your wire that come back on themselves. So what this is basically doing is this is creating an energy flow from one of the wires that goes around the loop and comes back onto itself and creates that continuous flow. The other wire, which has the flow in the opposite direction, it flows around this way and creates continuous flow. So what this is doing is creating a counter-rotating vortex that comes out of here. Now, this guy here, the royal cubit that Slim discovered, it produces 144 megahertz frequency. And again, you cut this wire off at any other length, and it's just a piece of twisted copper wire. Copper is a pretty special element because it is a crystalline structure, but it doesn't produce that frequency. So Slim Sperling took the royal cubit that they found, and they took it to Hans Becker in his private lab, and Hans discovered another frequency, and he was actually able to put this on his machines, and I really wish I knew exactly what it was that he measures the frequency with. I actually need to find that out because we have discovered 3 new qubit lengths. So he discovered that this was 144 megahertz, the Becker qubit's 177 megahertz. And again, these both produce that counter-rotating vortex. It produces it in a column, so this is just a column of energy that goes out of both sides. So I don't claim to be a quantum theorist or a physicist or anything of that nature. I consider myself to be a master tool builder. And so this is what I do. And the reason that I came here to the conference to speak today is because I would like somebody to play with this technology, because these things produce an infinite amount of energy, and it's just trying to figure out how to pull this energy out of here, this tensor field energy. They did do some research too with water, which is what the main topic here today is, about water energetics. They took 2 beakers of water, they put them on a balance beam, and then they put one of the beakers of water within this column of light, and it actually gets measurably lighter. The reason for that is this contains the highest piezoelectric properties out of anything that has been tested in this one lab, and that was the gentleman who coined the term Ormus, is the one who did the testing on these things. So with that, it's dependent upon the salts and the other minerals that are in the water, and if anybody knows much about the Ormus, on creating those to spin to actually create that water to be lighter in weight. And again, these things, just like the Triskelion, they will take acidic water and change it to pH to a neutral pH within 24 to 48 hours. So here recently, we actually discovered 3 new qubit lengths. And the qubit lengths that we've discovered are through dowsing. Now, it's tough when we do not have the scientific evidence to say, okay, this one's 188 megahertz frequency, this one's 333, This one is 764. But that's the thing, is that there is no real tools that can show you the way the energy flows or what these things are doing. But we can do it by experiential. Because most of the rings and things, rings and subsequent tools, are used in healing practices, is what a lot of people are using these rings for. There's been a lot of reports since 1996. Slim Sperling's widow, she has Lifelight Technologies, and they have done extensive research, mainly while Slim was alive. And I'm not sure what they've done since 2007 when Slim passed. But I actually have never had the privilege to actually meet the wonderful Slim Sperling in person. I've worked with a lot of people who have, and he's a pretty fascinating gentleman. And again, he was a self-taught geodowser, just like I was before I ran into the tools. So with that, we're finding that these things work with electromagnetics. He used these, all the different tools in the qubit links, especially in Denver. He would go around in Denver and find all these magnetic lines, the Hartmann grid lines, any other geopathic stress lines, and he would take certain qubit lengths, so usually the 20.6 inches, and he would staple it into the ground, make it kind of like an L, like a dowsing rod. He would staple it into the ground, and like the Hartmann grid lines, when they come into a building, they'll actually hit this staple and they'll bounce up and over. Because not only did Slim believe it, but there's a lot of German doctors who believe that if you spend too much time underneath of the intersecting of those grid lines, it can be detrimental to your health. This is the GDV imaging, the gaseous discharge visualization of the Hedeka, and this just shows how the energy moves in it. We've also done the research with the Hedeka for water energizing, where we sit a glass of water on top of it for 10 minutes, and then we do a before and after the water droplets. And the after is just, that little water droplet is just electrified. And you can see the videos actually on my website of the water droplets that we've done the gaseous discharge visualization with as well. The other GDV imaging that we did, if you could show the next video, this is showing a tensor ring. Now the imaging on this, the camera lens is only about 3 inches, so this is a really small tensor ring. And it just kind of shows the field that's going within it there. Because again, that field is pretty much contained within the center of the ring and that column that goes out. And this is a magnet, and again, this is just a small refrigerator magnet, and it's just kind of showing how the magnetic lines are flowing on this. The reason that I wanted to try to show this is that I would like to show that this is producing a Meissner effect, which is pulling out the magnetic lines and adding it to the tensor ring. Oh, thank you. So within the tensor ring, you see that it's actually pulling the magnetic lines out, and it's arced them over onto the copper. So this is not because of a magnetic principle, because copper is doesn't accept magnetism. So I don't know if we can actually prove that this is a room temperature superconductor, but that is what everybody has always said about these things, because they do negate magnetic lines. And again, where Slim was doing the stapling into the earth, we're finding that these things will restructure electromagnetics and geomagnetics. And so where these produce a column of light, I've made these other structures that are...
Brian has a nice little tent out in the middle of the exhibit area out front, and he's got these beautiful material artifacts, the spirals. They're kind of, I don't know, some of them remind me of hula hoops. I've seen these things around for years and years, and he's got a pretty Our next speaker for our Saturday morning session, we have Brian Besk.